you, Zani, and to Barbara and to Wolfson College for hosting this really important conference. We're delighted to be here. And as Daniel mentioned, this is the report that we wrote and published last year about fieldwork we conducted in Rakhine State. I'm going to basically make some prefatory remarks to talk a little bit about the research and the methodology, and then I'm going to hand over to Tom, who's going to talk a little bit more about the, our findings. Primarily, I want to make 4 points drawing on this research. Now, the research was funded by the Economic and Social Research Council under their urgency grant system. It was an 18-month study. We had 4 months in the field, and there were 3 researchers. The other researcher is Alicia Delacour-Venning. And I think the question that we set out to explore was the persecution that we had heard of in 2012, was it genocide? Could it be defined as genocide or some other form of very serious persecution? The evidence that we accrued gave us a resounding yes as an answer to that question. The framework that we employed was not a legal one. In fact, the best literature on genocide, I think, makes clear that genocide is a process, a social process, and it's best understood as that rather than a legal construct for a number of reasons. Under international law, the labelling of genocide places certain obligations on states, obligations to prevent and to punish the perpetrators of genocide. And historically, we know that states are extremely reluctant to label persecution as genocide because it does require them to act. And I think that if we wait for a court, an international court of law or an international tribunal to declare or to decide whether or not the persecution that's taking place is in fact genocide, then I think we will have waited far too long. We don't have time to wait for international courts to decide what's happening. And I don't think we can, I think history shows us that we don't have much faith in the international legal processes with regard to genocide. So when we talk about a social process, what do we mean? We have looked at a whole range of genocide literature. The very best of it talks about stages, and in fact it's Daniel Feierstein's work which we have found the most valuable. And Daniel talks about a 6-stage process, and as you'll see here, the first stage, stigmatization, the second stage, harassment, which is about physical violence primarily, when stigmatization takes on a very physical and ugly form, that of violence. This kind of stigmatization and violence leads, and in the case of the Rohingya in 2012, led to the isolation of the Rohingya population in and around Sittwe into camps. So they were isolated from the rest of the Rakhine State population. And what we found when we did our research in the camps in Ongmingala ghetto and in the villages in the Sittwe and Mrauk U region, we weren't able to get access to northern Rakhine State, but there are a number of people in the audience who have, and I'd be very interested to hear more about what they have to say. But from that field work, from those experiences and our observations, it was clear to us that the Rohingya were at this particular stage of systematic weakening. The Burmese state is involved in the weakening of the Rohingya population, and this is a method, a genocidal, it's a method in the genocide process, that you weaken a community to such an extent that it no longer acts with purpose, that it is excluded from the rest of the society, that the state no longer holds what it sees to be a moral obligation to this group of people. And certainly in terms of the lack of healthcare that we heard about earlier, the very limited food rations that the World Food Programme deliver to the camps, the loss of livelihood, the inability for the Rohingya in Rakhine State to actually lead purposeful lives is removing them from the society in which they were born and grew up. And so the point about the process, and I know we've moved on in terms of the slides, is to say that these are overlapping stages. They don't occur discretely. The stigmatization still occurs, the isolation is happening, the physical violence is brewing under the surface and erupts periodically. And we are also seeing evidence of the final two stages, which are mass extermination. We saw the violence of 2012, but also in terms of the very final stage, which is the reorganisation of society, a society in which the identity of the Rohingya, in this case, no longer exists. We see evidence of that with the denial of the use of the term Rohingya. You simply can't use the term Rohingya inside Burma. We've had Aung San Suu Kyi declare to the ambassador, the US ambassador, that they're not to use the term Rohingya. This is about denial of identity. So in effect, really, my time is up, so I'm going to pass over to Tom, who's going to talk in more detail about systematic weakening. Thanks.
Thank you, Penny. And yes, just following on, I just wanted to talk briefly about what we witnessed ourselves in the camps, and just to show you some photographs to help imagine what it's like there. As we heard earlier, there is basically no healthcare whatsoever. The humanitarian infrastructure was attacked in March 2014. This was organised attacks against the international organisations that are helping the Rohingya. And this led to the setting up of the Emergency Coordination Centre, the ECC, which is a layer of bureaucracy that was introduced by the Union government to kind of assuage the concerns that led to the attacks against the international organisations, in that the Rakhine Buddhists were being left out of the international aid interventions in the state. The Rakhine National Party, we went and talked to them. They're also involved in this systematic weakening. They campaigned on an anti-Rohingya platform and swept to power in the recent elections. And some of the things they said to us were, when the international community give the Rohingya a lot of food, they grow fat and become stronger, and then they will become more violent. They also said, according to 1982 law, people don't have citizenship, should be kept in prison. But there are so many people that we can't keep them in prison. So as an idea, they should have a concentration camps to keep people who don't have citizenship. And then the caveat was added, oh sorry, not concentration camps, detention centres. This was in English, so it wasn't like there was some sort of translation problem. We also saw this poster at the ANP. This is a Arakan Army calendar. And on it we have clearly in English, Defenders of the Fatherland, which is a term that I hadn't seen since research on Nazi Germany. Also the ECC themselves, we interviewed members of the ECC, and they talked about things about not enough space. Lebensraum would be another word for what they were talking about. So if you look at the Rohingya IDP camps, this is an unregistered camp. A lot of people are unregistered by the government, and the UN go by the government's registration status, so that's highly problematic. I just wanted to show you the Rohingya IDP camp just to compare it to, this is the only kind of healthcare we saw. These are unqualified people acting as pharmacists and giving healthcare. We saw this gentleman giving injections without wiping down the arm first and things like this. This is the kind of only thing that people have to do. A lot of kids go around collecting dung and making these fuel. another Rohingya IDP camp in Mrauk U. But what I wanted to show you was the Rakhine IDP camp, because there are Rakhine Buddhists in IDP camps as well, and they're very different. It's one family per household. They're raised off the ground, so you are not subject to the flooding and the heat problems that the Rohingya IDP camps. You can come in and out, and you can see there are lots of businesses going, and it just shows the attitude of those who constructed and run the camps, that there is a segregation between the way people are being treated. The IDP camps, some of the IDPs we talked to in the camps weren't actually IDPs. The people who had lived in the houses had moved home and had rented them out, so that these were generally seen as decent accommodation, the Rakhine IDP camps. Stark contrast to the Rohingya IDP camps, especially the unregistered. And then when you go into Sittwe and walk around, you see burnt out mosques like this one. And also at the background of the systematic weakening is the weakening of the Rohingya as a political force. They're not allowed vote, the disenfranchisement. And this is led by the local civil society protesting against Rohingya right to protest. And these are just some pictures. Supporters of Rohingya are enemies. Médecins Sans Frontières, get out. This is a protest against Ban Ki-moon. This is a protest against Quintana. And you can see his face with an X through it, which I'm sorry to have to show that in front of Thomas Quintana sitting here in the second row. But they don't need your bias suggestion is what the message is, whereas, as we know, Thomas was only trying to bring to light the situation. And just to absolutely finish, something that people should probably look into is one of the drivers of the moving Rohingya out of their villages is economic development, and this is a map showing where a port is being built on top of where the Rohingya were moved out of. And I'll leave it there, and thank you, and excuse my overgo.
Thank you, Penny and Thomas. The next presentation should be done by Dr. Nancy Hudson-Roth, who is an honorary fellow at the Tasmania Asia Institute in Australia, and the presentation is Rohingya Genocide, International Complicity in Burma's Internal Violence. Due to personal reasons, Dr. Nancy Hudson-Roth is not able to be with us, but Professor MacManus will present some excerpts of her presentation.
Yes, and that's a very important caveat. I am not Dr. Nancy Hudson-Roth, but I have agreed to read some of the extracts from her paper because unfortunately she wasn't able to make it here today. I hope that you have seen this paper in the emails from the organisers. If you haven't, please do get in touch and they can send it to you because I'm not going to be reading that much from it. So I'll just read straight a few excerpts that stood out to me as important. At every stage in governments and national development, with the brief exception of pre-military days of the 1960s, the government of Burma has systematically denied providing Rohingya with some kind of recognition, including the right to citizenship. At one point post-independence, the Rohingya claim of separate ethnic identity was recognized by the democratic government of Premier U Nu. This is 1948 to 1958. Subsequent governments denied this and this was completed by the 1982 citizenship law. The entire population of Burma is colour-coded, and after Operation Nagamin, which continued for a decade, almost the whole population of Burma was registered and granted identity cards. The Rohingya were told they did not fall into any category. There has been an organised forgetting of the long reign of terror which various regimes have conducted against the Rohingya since the 60s. The Rohingyas who survived mass attacks of violence in 2012 remaining in Burma are held in detention camps surrounded by fences and guards, denied all basic freedoms necessary for a dignified life. They have no livelihood, they have no land, they have no schooling, they have no voice, they do not appear in the census, and they do not run for elections. Dr. Hudson-Root then goes on to talk about General Ne Win's rule from 1962 to 1988, followed by the SLORC, the SLORK, and you can have a look at that in the paper yourself. There are some detailed points about the different treatment of the Rohingya by those regimes. And also highlighted is the kind of modern version of this, which is international capital investment into Burma since 2010, which is ignoring basically the situation on the ground and is just seeing Rakhine State as an investment opportunity. And this is especially from China and India, but also there are a lot more other companies that have been invited in and are taking resources and using the strategic site of Rakhine State to further international capital. And this is the kind of modern version of the SLORC and the Ne Win years. And I'll just finish with another section. An NLD reconnaissance group touring each state and division met with elected federal and state MPs concerning land confiscation. In reply to my question what Rohingya would be represented in current Rakhine State visit, I was told the group would meet only with elected members, no Rohingya. Given that the Rohingya were denied a vote, how would mass confiscation of their land be addressed, I asked. It's a very touchy issue, I was told. Jo Hla Ong, a lawyer, human rights defender, Rohingya community leader and former staff member of Médecins Sans Frontières, was arrested and jailed in July 2013. He was defending Rohingya men who refused to register as Bengali. He's released under presidential amnesty in 2014. The NLD has ignored the knowledge, expertise and contributions of the Rohingya who have stood the NLD are planning a new democratic nation. They deny the Rohingya recognition or place or hope of survival in the new Burma. The 2012 acts of mass violence against Rohingya were another step of terror by a regime determined to exterminate people simply for who they are. Each year, the lives of Rohingya has been further diminished. The government has succeeded in creating public resentment, animosity and hatred towards Rohingya. In the upside-down world of Burma, the Rohingya who have had their land, livelihood and voices confiscated are accused of overtaking the country. They have been categorized as refugees, smuggled persons, stateless migrants, homeless, persecuted and illegals, but not human beings deserving freedom and dignity and a voice in their own future. And I will leave it at that, and any questions please to Dr. Nancy Hudson-Rudd herself. Thank you.